In this video, I'm going to show you 30 things that you can do to get the best possible start in Skyrim. From getting filthy rich in the opening minutes of the game, to wielding the most insanely overpowered weapons before you even hit level 2. We're going to be covering a lot of ground. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's get into it. The very first thing you can do in Skyrim to get the best possible start is to pick a race that aligns with your playstyle. Now, you'll often hear people telling you that race doesn't matter in Skyrim, and while I agree that that's true for the lower difficulty settings, it does have a significant impact if you want to challenge yourself with Master, Expert, or Legendary difficulty. This isn't because of the minor skill bonuses that each race receives, these quickly become irrelevant after the first few levels, but it's tied to the racial powers and abilities that can have a major impact through your entire playthrough. For example, Bretons have an ability that gives them a default 25% resistance to all types of magic damage, and then a power that adds a further 50% spell absorption for 60 seconds, which allows them to breeze through what could otherwise be quite difficult fights against magic users in a way that other races simply can't. Another example would be the Orc's Berserker Rage power that both doubles the damage you deal and halves the damage you take for 60 seconds, which again is just massively impactful when facing a challenging enemy on a higher difficulty setting. So the bottom line is, if you're going to be playing at Expert or above, then start with a strong race choice. It's going to make a lot more difference than people give it credit for. Now, my second tip is a little bit of a cheeky one, and if you want to play 100% by the rules, then you might want to skip it. But for those of you who don't mind bending them slightly, you can gain a massive advantage in Skyrim before you even leave the tutorial. Basically, during the tutorial, there are two NPCs, Ralof and Hadvar, who will not react if you attack them due to their place in the story. And as a result, you can basically use them as punch bags to level any of your offensive combat skills, such as one-handed, two-handed, destruction magic, and you can even level sneak on them by continually attacking them from stealth. Now, I wouldn't recommend grinding any skills to max level doing this, as it's both boring and trivializes the game, but a few points in your primary skills can go a very long way early on, so it's just one to think about. Speaking of leveling your primary skills, make sure that after you leave the tutorial you don't miss out on picking up a blessing from one of these standing stones on the road to Riverwood, as these are going to offer the ability to level all skills in either magic, stealth or combat 20% faster. This might seem blindingly obvious to many players, however you have to remember that new players are often encouraged not to follow the main quest at all. They're told that in Skyrim they can just pick a direction and run in that direction and they will find something, which is honestly an awesome feature of Skyrim and a massive selling point, but it can also cause players to not follow the road to Riverwood and therefore miss out on this powerful buff. So whichever direction you plan to run in, quickly grab a standing stone blessing first. Okay, so tip number 4 is another naughty one, but it's insanely overpowered. So I'm going to tell you about it, and then it's up to you whether you have the willpower not to use it. Basically, in Skyrim, there are a number of hidden chests that you were never supposed to know about, and these are the chests that act as the inventory for the game's merchants. However, there are 3 chests in particular that Bethesda did a particularly poor job of hiding, and these chests are absolutely packed with gold, gear, potions, reagents, everything you can imagine. It's a ridiculous head start. And to top it all off, because you were never meant to find these chests, taking items from them doesn't even count as stealing. In terms of finding these chests, the first one can be found just outside of Solitude, buried underneath this grassy patch just outside the main gate, and by the way, you'll need to crouch down to access this one. Then there's a second chest that you can find just outside of Markarth, next to this wall you can see in front of me, and you just need to go around to the other side of this wall and you should easily be able to locate the chest in the grass behind it. And then finally you have the Dawnstar chest, which can be found just outside of the Ironbreaker mine, just nestled in between this rock formation that you can see on the screen right now. Now, obviously, this is not intended behavior, and you could definitely categorize it as cheating. But then again, Bethesda did leave it in the game, and it gives you a ridiculous head start. However, there are some more legitimate ways to get some early gear. You're just going to have to work a bit harder for them. And one place that I'd recommend to start is the Ember Shard Mine, which can be found between Helgen and Riverwood at the very start of the game. This mine's filled with bandits who you can loot for some early weapons and armor, and there's a boss chest at the end that has a good chance of offering you something a bit tastier, such as an enchanted item. However, before you go diving into bandit-infested cave systems, I'd suggest that you get very familiar with the quick save function, as unlike more modern games, Skyrim doesn't autosave every 7 seconds, and forgetting to save the game can result in serious disappointment when you realise that you've just lost several hours worth of progress. Typically, Skyrim saves when you transition between zones, so when you enter a dungeon for example. However, it's very easy to clear an entire dungeon, die at the end, and then have to do the whole thing all over again. And when exploring the open world, well, this can be even worse, as you can easily go for hours without an autosave and then have all of that progress wiped out by a random dragon attack or by being launched into the upper atmosphere by a giant. So in short, save early and save often. Another thing you're going to want to do early on is to start exploring the map and unlocking fast travel locations, and the best way to do this early on is to use the often overlooked carriage system, which will allow you to travel between major settlements for a small fee. You can find the first carriage just outside of the main gates of Whiterun, and from there you can pay the driver to take you to each of the other cities in order to discover them, and to consequently unlock a fast travel network that will allow you to get to any location on the map far faster than simply running. When it comes to reaching locations outside of the main cities a little more efficiently, it's definitely worth picking up a horse as early as you can, as not only will they increase your movement speed, but they'll also allow you to travel when over encumbered, and are weirdly good at climbing up mountains, saving you a significant amount of time when you're trying to find a path to the top. You can pick up your first horse for 1,000 gold at the Whiterun stables, which really isn't a huge amount of gold to get your hands on, especially if you follow some of the tips I'm going to share later in this video. It's also a smart move to get yourself a follower in the early stages of the game, as not only do they offer some additional combat ability, but they also function as bottomless bags for the loot you pick up during your adventures. This is because if you direct your followers to pick up an item rather than opening their inventory and trading it to them, the item will have no impact on the follower's overall carry weight, meaning that they can carry an unlimited amount of gear for you. Then you can simply unload them at the nearest merchant and flog it all for a tasty profit. Just don't let them die with all your loot on them, else you're going to have a logistical nightmare on your hands. Another handy thing to know about followers is that there are also a number of NPCs in the game who are both skill trainers and followers, and due to presumably a bug that Bethesda never bothered to fix, this means that you can get them to train you completely free of charge. All you need to do is have them train you in a particular skill, then open their inventory, which you can do due to their follower status, and just take the gold that you paid them for that training straight back. Bonus tip, Faendal in Riverwood is a great early follower to do this with. This is because he's extremely easy to get, reasonably competent in combat due to his ranged attacks, and offers training for the ever popular archery skill. Now, speaking of skill leveling, there are a number of things you can do early in the game to make some of what would otherwise be slow leveling skills improve a little faster. And you can do this either legitimately or through exploits. For example, when it comes to legitimate tricks, you can level illusion by running around and spamming the muffle spell, alteration by spamming detect life, and conjuration by spamming soul trap on an already dead body. I won't go into methods for every single skill in this video, as the point here is just to raise your awareness that there are a number of tricks that you can use if any particular skill starts to fall behind. However, I do have a video that gives you a legitimate method for leveling every skill in the game, and I'll make sure it's linked in the description down below. I also have a video that will give you some less legitimate options, and I'll throw that in the description too. But I'll give an example here as well so you can get a flavour of the absolutely ridiculous exploits that can be pulled off in Skyrim. And for this example, I'm going to show you how you can level destruction all the way to 100 with a single spell cast. To pull this off, you simply need to get hold of the Unbounded Storm spell from Hobsfall Cave to the west of Winterhold, then travel to one end of the map, start casting the spell, and then whilst you're casting it, travel as far as you can to the other side of the map. You'll find that when you arrive, your destruction skill will be at level 100 from a single spellcast. Absolutely ridiculous, I know, and it trivializes the game, but is also kind of fun to experiment with in your later playthroughs once you've already done things the legitimate way. Anyway, speaking of which, let's get back to the more legitimate methods of gaining a strong start, and let's talk about early game weapons next. Because while the Ember Shard mine items will give you a nice little boost in the beginning, after a few levels you're going to want to upgrade to something that gives you a little more bang for your buck. And when it comes to early game melee weapons, they don't get much better than the Mace of Moloch Baal. Why? Well, firstly, this one-handed mace is on par with an ebony mace, meaning that it deals high base damage. Then on top of that, it offers a very rare free enchant on a single weapon, causing it to drain both the enemy's magicka and stamina, as well as trapping their soul, which is just enormously efficient if you want to engage in enchanting. To get access to this weapon, you'll need to take a trip to Markarth and look for a vigilant named Tyrannus, who's going to give you a quest called the House of Horrors, and you simply need to follow this quest to the end. The most important detail here is that this quest can be started as early as level 1, which is what makes this mace such an incredibly powerful early game weapon. Though if melee combat just isn't your thing, then no worries, there's also a stupidly overpowered bow that you can get from very early in the game. Though this one has a bit of a twist to it, because it's not actually a bow at all, it's a conjuration spell. Basically, the Bound Bow spell allows you to summon an ethereal bow and arrows for 120 seconds, which sounds pretty basic. That is until you realise that this is a Daedric quality bow and therefore offers an extremely high amount of damage for this early stage in the game. And the beauty is, it's not even difficult to get hold of. You simply need to travel to Fort Amel, which can be found at this location on the map, enter the prison area and loot the Bound Bow tome, as I'm showing in the video right now. The only catch here is that you're going to need to invest a few level ups in your magicka attribute in order to have enough magicka available to actually cast the spell. I'm also going to throw in a second powerful early game ranged option that often gets overlooked, and that's crossbows, a weapon type added to the game with the Dawnguard DLC. And the reason I think that people often miss this one in the early game is the assumption that Dawnguard doesn't start until level 10, therefore meaning you can't access crossbows until level 10. Well, that's just plain wrong, and you can actually access them at level 1 for a serious boost to your range potential. The trick here is that you don't actually need to wait to be offered the quest at level 10. Instead, you can just head to Fort Dawnguard via Dayspring Canyon and speak to Isran to kick off the questline regardless of your level. And while you're going to really struggle to progress the Dawnguard questline much at level 1, you should be able to progress it far enough to unlock crossbows, which are pretty damn strong at level 1 as they do reasonable base damage relative to other early ranged weapons, such as the hunting bow for example, and they also ignore 50% of armor, which absolutely shreds heavily armored opponents. Now, I know what you're thinking, but what about magic users? Where are our early game tendies? Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you, and if spells are what you're after, then I'd recommend that one of the very first things you do in the game is travel to Winterhold and join the College of Winterhold. It's really simple to join. You basically just need to start a dialogue with the NPC who's on the bridge on the way to the College of Winterhold. And then once you're a member, you can enjoy the benefits of free magicka-based equipment, skill trainers for every school of magic, and most importantly, access to a wide range of spell tomes to purchase. I'm not going to list every spell here as clearly there are stacks of them, but what I would recommend going for in the early game is Firebolt for pure damage output, Flame Atronach as a strong early game summon, and Healing Hands when it comes to a solid performer in terms of health regen. But as you're going to see, there are a huge range of options, and you can get pretty creative with them once you join the Mages Guild and gain access. Another thing that's 100% worth doing early on when it comes to magic is unlocking dragon shouts, which requires you to progress the main story to the point that dragons start randomly spawning into the world, which happens just after you kill the first dragon outside of Whiterun. Dragon Shouts are powerful spells that can be used in combination with pretty much any playstyle, and they can make a huge difference to your combat ability early on. And while you can learn these shouts from word walls regardless of your main story progress, you'll need to absorb dragon souls in order to actually use them, which you can only obtain by killing a dragon. So no dragons means no dragon souls, and ultimately no shouts. Of course, the downside of unlocking dragons early on is that you will then from that point onwards be randomly attacked by them while exploring the open world, which can get pretty annoying. But on balance, I'd say it's a price worth paying. Now, we talked about the Mages Guild, or the College of Winterhold I should say, but there are a couple of other organisations worth joining early on in order to get a tasty early game boost. And if you're going down the stealthy assassin route, then the Dark Brotherhood is an absolute no-brainer. There are a number of benefits on offer, but the big ones for me are that it gives almost instant access to the incredibly overpowered Shrouded Armor set, it provides you with one of the better horses in the game for free, and it offers you a staggering 20,000 gold reward for completing the final mission, which is intended to be spent on doing up the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary, but the reality is you can just keep it. And that's a pretty significant amount of money, especially during the early stages of the game, and it's going to set you up pretty well for the rest of your journey. To join the Dark Brotherhood, you need to complete the Innocence Lost quest that you can pick up from Aventus Aretino in Windhelm. Once you've completed his quest, your character simply needs to go to sleep and the Dark Brotherhood questline will be triggered. It's also worth considering joining the Thieves Guild early on, as similarly to the Dark Brotherhood, it offers some very nice gear rewards for thief-based characters, but most importantly of all, it provides you with access to fences who will buy stolen goods from you, which can be a really nice way of making some easy gold in the early game. To join the Thieves Guild, you simply need to go to the Riften Marketplace during the daytime and complete a task for Brynjolf, and then just follow the questline from there. This actually leads neatly into the next section of tips, which are focused on helping you make some early game gold. And as I just alluded to, one such option is to join the shady activities of the criminal underworld by signing up to the Thieves Guild and using a fence to launder stolen goods. But where should you obtain these stolen goods? Who should you steal from? There are a lot of choices. Well, I've always found that some of the easiest targets to gain a tasty sum early on are the various shops that sell high value items such as potions, jewelry, and soul gems, for example. Simply wait until nightfall, break into the shops, clean them out, and then flog your ill-gotten goods to your friendly local fens. Oh, and another bonus tip here, if you steal crafting ingredients such as alchemy ingredients and soul gems, then once you use them for crafting, the resulting item doesn't count as being stolen, so you can effectively fence them through the crafting process as well. Speaking of crafting, another easy early game gold making method is to use Enchanting to significantly increase the value of items before you sell them. All you need to do is take any old piece of equipment, such as a weapon, armor, or item of jewelry, and slap an enchant on it to significantly increase its value. Some enchants are worth a lot more than others, and clearly I can't cover every single one of them in this video, but what I would suggest doing is just going with the highest value enchant that you currently have available, and just sticking it on every piece of equipment you pick up before flogging it to a vendor for a significant increase in value. Be a little careful when it comes to looting heavy weapons and armor, however, as unless you're using the follower trick that I shared earlier, then picking up absolutely everything you come across is going to make you over-encumbered very, very quickly. If you're not using this trick and you're doing things 100% legitimately, then it's always good policy to focus on items that have a high value to weight ratio, such as jewelry, enchanted light items, potions, and gems, for example. And to get in the habit of just dropping all of your cheap heavy items when you start to reach your carry capacity limit. On the topic of potions actually, this leads me to probably the most powerful Skyrim money-making technique of them all. If you discount exploits, of course. And that is the humble skill of alchemy. Basically, combining ingredients using alchemy will always result in a potion that has a higher gold value than that of the ingredients used. And the beauty of this is that these ingredients are absolutely everywhere from the very start of the game. So the early game tip here is to simply loot absolutely every ingredient you come across, then head over to an alchemy station and instantly increase the value of all of those ingredients by turning them into potions and then flogging them to a vendor. Now, due to the basic ingredients you'll have access to early on, you're going to start by only making small amounts of each sale. But once you get your hands on a few more exotic ingredients, let's say, you can start to make absolutely ludicrously priced potions such as the one that I'm showing on the screen right now. Honestly, alchemy can easily set you up money-wise for your entire playthrough, and it's my chosen method for gold making the majority of the time. There is a broader point to make here as well though, as making potions isn't just about making a quick buck. Alchemy is just generally a great skill to get to grips with early on due to the incredible boost to survivability, damage, and just general utility that can be offered by the skill. And this becomes especially impactful and even arguably vital if you're playing on higher difficulty settings. It's also the case that getting started with alchemy is incredibly simple. I've basically already described it. All you need to do is, like I said, pick up every single ingredient you come across, and then when you happen upon an alchemy lab, such as the one at Dragon Dragon's Reach Keep in Whiterun, then you're going to have plenty of ingredients to start mixing in order to discover useful potions. It really is as simple as that to get yourself started. However, to use alchemy in detail is of course a far more in-depth subject, and this feels like as good a time as any to mention that I have in-depth guides for pretty much every single feature that we've covered in this video, and I'll link the playlist containing all of those guides in the description down below. Of course, alchemy isn't the only skill that's going to offer you a serious early game advantage, and getting into smithing during the early levels can easily make or break a fresh character's ability to survive at expert level and above. Fortunately, smithing is accessible from the very beginning of the game. You simply need to gather materials by mining ores and collecting animal pelts, or even just by buying them or stealing them and fencing them through crafting as per the bonus tip I mentioned earlier. Then when you take these materials to a forge, you are likely going to be able to craft better weapons and armor than anything else you've found so far. And at the same time, you're going to get a head start on leveling up the skill that will ultimately allow you to craft the most powerful weapons in the entire game. Now, if you want to make your crafted weapons and armor even more powerful, then I'd also highly recommend getting started with enchanting as early in your playthrough as possible, as this is going to allow you to apply a whole range of powerful effects to these items, which in turn will have a huge impact on the amount of damage you're able to both deal out and receive. Enchanting is slightly more complex than the other two crafting skills, as you're going to need to collect charged soul stones and learn magical effects in order to be able to actually enchant your items, so this is definitely one to do a little bit more research on. However, it's easily the most brokenly powerful feature when it comes to crafting uniquely powerful builds, combined with alchemy at least. Now, if you are going to get into enchanting, then I'd also suggest getting your hands on the Black Star as early as you can, as this is going to make the process far smoother and your early game enchants far more powerful. The Black Star functions as a reusable Grand Soul Gem, but unlike Azura's Star, its counterpart, it can also trap Black Souls, which come from humanoid NPCs. And therein lies the most important detail, as Black Souls are always grand level no matter the enemy. And what this means for the early game is that with the Black Star, you can collect the most powerful soul gems in the game from even the weakest level 1 bandit. And then as a result, your enchantments will be significantly more powerful than was ever intended at this stage of the game. This is made possible due to the fact that the Black Star quest can be completed as early as level 1, which was probably a bit of an oversight by the developers, but it's one that you can take massive advantage of. To get hold of the Black Star, you simply need to begin the quest called the Black Star at the Shrine of Azura, and ensure that at the end you don't hand the artifact back to Azura's priestess, as if you do, she'll cleanse it and it will become Azura's Star instead, which critically is unable to capture Black Souls and will cause this item's relevance in the early game to plummet. Now, regardless of which crafting skills you focus on, you're going to end up with a lot of raw materials to store. And even with a follower, providing you don't use the exploit, you're soon enough going to end up with too many items to carry between you. And that's why my next tip is to get yourself a player house as early in the game as possible. And while the most obvious candidate is Breeze Home in Whiterun, which becomes available for 5,000 gold after you complete the Dragon Rising quest, when it comes to storing items, there are actually a number of free options available as well. A great example of this is Anice's cabin, which, while not technically yours, you can murder good old Anice and then take over her home as a base to safely store your items. She even has alchemy and enchanting stations in her basement, so it ties in nicely with my previous few tips as well. Though do be careful using this method elsewhere, as there are only a limited number of locations outside of player houses that actually offer safe storage, and the vast majority of storage containers will delete your items after a set amount of time. Of course, you could just follow the time-honoured tradition of marrying into wealth instead, as if you marry the right person, then this actually offers another way to get a free house, as if your spouse owns a home, it will automatically become yours when you tie the knot. And on top of that, there are a number of other benefits to marriage, such as the ability for your spouse to make you some passive gold, provide you with food that boosts your health, stamina and magicka regeneration, and give you the lover's comfort buff that allows your skills to level 15% faster. And finally, while we're on the subject of love, another powerful boost you can give your character early on comes from completing the Book of Love quest. This often overlooked quest will grant you a permanent 15% resistance to magical damage once you complete it, which is a huge benefit when engaging enemy mages and can be particularly useful once again if you're playing on the higher difficulty settings. You don't even need to engage in any combat to complete the quest, it's basically just travelling around talking to various NPCs, which makes it a really easy one to complete at a low level. To start the quest, simply head to the Temple of Mara in Riften and speak to Dinya Balu, and simply follow the quest line from there. Anyway, I hope this video has been useful in helping you to get the best possible start for your next playthrough. If you want to go even further and just completely break Skyrim to basically become a god, then be sure to check out my guide to Skyrim's most insanely overpowered tricks next, which should be popping up at the bottom right of your screen right about now. Also, if you enjoyed the video, remember to like and subscribe for more, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.